I'd like to welcome you to Delta Data's webinar on the DOL Fiduciary Rule and its impact on advisors and product selection. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. The webinar will last approximately 30 minutes, and we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. Mics are muted for all attendees. We do encourage your questions, which will be addressed during the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Please submit questions in the questions panel in the GoToWebinar. If your question is not answered, someone will follow up with you after the webinar. The session is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees. Joining me today will be Jason Griffin. Jason is a Senior VP of Delta Data and oversees all product development. The DOL Fiduciary Rule, currently scheduled to go into effect April the 10th of this year, is causing massive changes in both back office operations and in the front office in order to ensure compliance with the rule. The DOL rule is far-reaching in the impact it will have on both the manufacturers and distributors of financial products to the retirement marketplace. The focus of this webinar will be the challenges that distribution firms and their financial advisors face in the product selection process and how technology can help facilitate and document the selection process. There are literally tens of thousands of financial products being sold into retirement plans and IRAs, mutual funds, target date funds, ETFs, variable annuities, indexed annuity, and a host of proprietary products. New products are being introduced almost daily by fund companies that are designed to provide a fiduciary safe product to firms and their advisors. Now more than ever before, firms need to exert more control over the product selection process of their financial advisors. Taking on the mantle of being a fiduciary requires a much more structured and controlled process in the product selection process than in the past. Even if the DOL rule is delayed, there are other very valid reasons to start implementing tighter controls around product selection. FINRA just released its 2017 Regulatory and Examination Priorities Letter. In their letter, they state, and I quote, "This may include examining firms' product vetting processes, supervisory systems, and controls to review recommendations." In the SEC's 2017 exam priorities, they point out that share class selection is on their focus list, and they state, "We will also assist the formulation of investment recommendations." Where client suitability used to be the standard, basically knowing a client's risk profile and their risk tolerance, the DOL rule has raised the bar considerably for firms and their advisors. Now there are many more standards to consider when recommending a product while acting in the best interest of the client, to include factors such as, are the fees reasonable? Are the investments diversified? Is there a conflict of interest? And is the investment understood by the client? Today, we will show you how existing technology, the data management portion of our distribution solution, can be used to help you, as a firm, implement a controlled and documented process for your advisor's product selection process. We will step through the 4 control points we believe are required in order to guide advisors to the most appropriate product selection for their client. Briefly, those 4 control points are, number 1, defining the universe of securities available for search that meet the basic or minimum product selection criteria as defined by the firm. Number 2, defining the data points critical to the selection process and required for the appropriate disclosure to the customer. 3, building predefined searches based on firm-imposed criteria, not advisor-imposed criteria. And 4, providing a side-by-side comparison of the short list of products that lead to the final product selection. So let's start with the universe of products out there. There are over 30,000 open-end mutual funds. There are thousands of proprietary products, thousands of variable fixed index annuities, ETFs, target date funds, etc. You probably have on your platform potentially 20 or 30,000 investment products today. There's no way an advisor can search through the entire universe looking for that needle in the haystack. Well, you've got to eliminate some of the noise. So, and the other thing you can do here I wanted to point out is that our data management suite comes with certain, industry supplied data that's available, street products, but you can also supplement with your own proprietary products into the product. So you can actually do comparisons of street available securities versus proprietary products. So how do we cut through that noise a little bit? Well, number one, you need to have a firm controlled product universe. So our data management suite allows you to build portfolios. You can have as many of these as you would like, and you can build them in any number of different ways. You could upload a list of securities to define a portfolio, or you can use search criteria to define what are the requirements to fit into a particular portfolio of securities, i.e., you may have a maximum expense ratio or a minimum performance level or a specified number of years for manager tenure. Any of these data points can be used to create a portfolio of securities that meet your firm-imposed minimum requirements for as a product inclusion. And then you can create business rules that run against the portfolio. So once you've selected the criteria for inclusion, you can then create business rules that constantly monitor changes in all of those data points. And if a data point changes, so it's outside of your minimum requirement, that product would be put out to the workbench for review by someone to see if it still should be included in that portfolio. Third thing you need to do is control the data that you want your advisors to look at. Our data dictionary comes with over 650 data points. There's no way you want your advisors sifting through and trying to find, here again, that needle in the haystack. What are the values? What are the data points that are critical to product selection? So the system allows you to select the data points not only out of the system supplied 650 data points, but it also allows you to supplement with your own user-defined data points, so that when the advisor is looking at that final grouping or selection of products, they're only looking at the data that is relevant to the selection process or for disclosure purposes to their client. Next, you want to control the search process. So you can predefine your searches. And here again, you can have an unlimited number of searches which you can define and label as you see fit, depending on the risk tolerance of the client, depending on the product type you're looking through, etc. And every data point that's in the system is available for search. And you can add parameters such as must equal, or is greater than, or equal or less to, things of that nature, so that the search will render only those products that meet the firm mandated requirements for product inclusion. And then fifth, you want to show that once you've run the search on the particular portfolio, it will render a subset of products that meet that criteria. It could be anywhere from a few up to 100 maybe. Then the advisor can go in and select up to 4 at a time and do a side-by-side comparison. So they can look at those pertinent data points side by side and evaluate the product that is best for his client. That data is then saved, and all of the search criteria, the portfolio criteria, and the final 4 that they select are saved. So you've got a fully documented, auditable process for FINRA, SEC, or DOL. And that data can also be transmitted to other systems via an application programming interface, or API. And then finally, you have the final product selections where the advisor picks that product and everything is fully documented at that point. All right. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, and he's going to walk us through a demo of the data management product and show us how we point out these 4 control areas we mentioned. Jason?
Thank you, Burton. So I think the best thing to tie this together as far as the demonstration, where Burton concluded was taking a large universe of investments, running through some criteria that you deem to be applicable as far as reducing that down to what your advisors need to be considering as far as advising an investor on what to invest in. And the last part of his illustration was having a final set of investments that is then shared with the investor. So I wanted to start there as far as the Aperio Suite. Aperio Suite is actually a web-enabled software as a service, a data management utility for our distribution clients. It comes turnkey, as Burton mentioned, with 40 Act mutual funds as well as the data that's available from the industry. But he mentioned that one of the value propositions to our clients is that they can supplement those pre-supplied 40 Act funds with separately managed accounts. His examples were annuities, ETFs, we have CITs, wrap investments. So the tool is designed to not only allow you to manage the 40 Act funds, but you can also supplement that universe to include things that are proprietary to your business. And in addition, you can actually supplement the data with what we call custom data or proprietary data, and that might be data that's meaningful to you and your operations, and especially as you're trying to negotiate these DOL mandates, having information that's available and resident on the investments, thus allowing you to further observe what's required of you in order to be complying and serving in the best interest of the investor. So I'll talk through more of that in just a moment. Let me go ahead and reveal what we call the view inventory. Burton referenced it as portfolios. So portfolios are simply a universe of configurable CUSIPs, or I call it a group or a bundle of investments. And he alluded to the fact that you may have certain performance measurements or risk measurements or fee-based measurements that you want to include as criteria for grouping securities into a view or what we call a portfolio. So there's really a myriad of ways that you could use these. They're configurable, client configurable. There's different ways in which you can construct, as he mentioned, the portfolios or views, but they're very helpful in administering the tool for various reasons. Number one, as a user of Aperio Suite, you're assigned what we call a role permission, what functions can I perform, but also a group permission, which is what investments and what data am I allowed to see. So that's where a view can come in too on administering the tool and how your advisors are using it. You can control that through the construction of these views. Additionally, when you're building a query to look at the universe to say, I want the CUSIPs that are investments that meet these criteria based on risk, performance, compensation structure, fees, etc. You can actually narrow down your search to a subset of the universe. Burton mentioned there's 40,000 plus investments potentially in your universe, but maybe you want to run a query campaign against a smaller subset, and that's where these views come in. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. Burton also alluded to the fact that you can build rules to help manage. So if you have views that are composed of investments that are based on, for instance, an expense ratio that cannot exceed a certain amount, then you can build rules that interrogate that continually to make sure that the investments that you have within that portfolio are not falling outside of the threshold that you deem to be required in order for it to reside in that view or portfolio. So with that, I'm going to move over to what we call the Power Search and Save Search utility. So the benefit of the Power Search utility, I'm going to reveal that in just a second, but you can establish these queries and save them so they're reusable. Not only that, but you can define them as a private query or a public query so that they either remain only in your inventory or they're available to others. I've defined a few. I'm going to open up this one that was already predefined by me and show you what the Power Search utility looks like. Again, I mentioned earlier that you control what data is available by user, and that applies to the Power Search utility as well. So there's several ways in which you want to control data. There may be, as Burton mentioned, data that's available in the tool that's really not applicable to your business. You can exclude that data from all users. Or you may have use cases where a particular user is only entitled to certain QSIPs and certain data. And when that's administered in the tool, that dynamically affects what I can see here as a user in this, what we call the search tool. So here are some of the criteria that we've configured for this particular demonstration as being applicable and available as a definable criteria for your search. A couple of these here at the bottom are actually illustrations of what we call the custom data. So in preparation for this demonstration, I built some platform eligibility data points, the wrap, the retail, the retirement. And then I built one called compensation structure that I'll show you here in just a moment. When I, as a business user, define these data points within a Perio, I actually can dictate what's the format, what's the type. So this particular data point is actually defined as having valid values or domain values, and then its boundaries upon what can actually be populated in that field. So we built this one to represent maybe 3 types of compensation structure: levelized, variable, and flat fee.
And if I could just point out, Jason, because it's a very important feature, is you don't need IT to add these user-defined data points. Any user who has the role-based security access can go in and create an unlimited number of user-defined data points with any number of domain values, or whatever fields you want to be available, all done through the user interface.
That's a great point. I mean, it took minutes to define these, and that's just one example. This is actually a Boolean expression, but you can define a numeric, alphanumeric, and within those, what's the text or the size? If it's a numeric, what's the format? Meaning, is it high precision? Is it an integer? So all of those are available when you're building the custom data. Again, for this demonstration, I just wanted to show a couple that we built here. Obviously, if you're building a query, again, what's available to me, I have transaction criteria. I got 12B1 criteria. I've got, I think Burton alluded to having manager tenure, and also maybe some performance variables and risk variables. So all of these, again, based on my permissions, are available for me to build a query, selecting the criteria for, depending on the type of data, might be equal, starts with, contains, or greater than, less than, etc. So all of those are definable for me. And then tying back to the portfolio that Burton illustrated in the flow, this is where I can say I'm running this query, but I want to run it on a smaller set of securities. Instead of the full universe, I want to run it on this portfolio called qualified securities. And so the criteria I define will now run on this set of QSIPs as opposed to the large set. So then we'll render that.
While it's running, another thing I'd point out is as a firm, you can create these predefined searches and save them and make them available to your advisors. You could also have some power user advisors maybe that are, more chartered financial, planners and things of that nature that you may allow to create their own searches. So through the rule-based security, you can allow some advisors to create their own searches, while others you may restrict to just using the firm designated searches.
That's a great point. So again, what I'm viewing is all influenced by, number one, what does my permission allow me to see? Number two, what portfolio did I use in my search campaign? And number three, what criteria was used to evaluate the QSIPs that are eligible to meet that. And then once it renders it here, you have several things that you can do. Burton alluded to the fact earlier that there's multiple ways to build your portfolio. So this would be one way if you ran a query based on certain conditions and then you want to build a portfolio based on that, then you can actually build that here. View name and portfolio name are used synonymously, but you could go ahead and construct your portfolio based on this set of investments that were rendered. The other thing that we're showcasing as part of this is to take the desired investments and build a comparison. So as I'm selecting these up to 4, it starts putting them on a palette for me to potentially render. So now I have 4 investments that I want to compare. They're shown here. And then once I click compare, it pulls up the comparison tool that we started with in the beginning of the actual live demonstration. So it's pulling up the 4. I think I mentioned earlier, it's going to render all of the data that I'm available to see. Again, each subscriber to the tool can administer what data is applicable overall and what data is applicable to me as a user. But there are options here too to say I only want to see the differences. It defaults to showing you all the data and highlights the differences. But this, just in summary and conclusion, so we've taken a large set of investments to include not only 40 Act funds, but also any proprietary investments that we've supplemented in the tool, and the custom data as well. We've run a query based on the criteria that we deem to be important and pertinent as it relates to complying with this mandate. And then we've rendered a set that are eligible, and then as an advisor I've selected 4 that I want to potentially render, and then I make a selection on the 1. Once I make a selection on the 1, I then have options of saying I need to reduce this down to a consumable form, either on my desktop, which it needs to include, here's the investment, here's the criteria that was used to render that, here's the view or portfolio that it was in, all of the information that would be required from an audit perspective, having that ability to download it to your desktop, but also having the ability to provide that to your enterprise via a secure API process. So I think in conclusion and summary, that's the value proposition that we're presenting here.
Thank you, Jason. That was good. So hopefully you got the picture of how we're trying to eliminate the noise from the product selection process using firm-based controls rather than letting the advisors just open to the Wild West. We're trying to keep them out of the ditch, as you can see. So the takeaways here we want you to go away with, number 1, putting controls on every step of the product selection process. You control it, not the advisor. Number 2, automate the monitoring of available products to ensure continued adherence to firm mandated requirements. This goes back to the rules engine. You can create any number of rules on any data point, and as data flows through the system, changes, updates, etc., the system is constantly looking at those changes and making sure that that value is still within the parameter you define for inclusion for product selection. And number 3, document the process. Everyone is going to be looking, how did that advisor pick that product, right? So you want to document from the universe to the data points it's selected on to what the final 4 or final 8 or final whatever to the final product. So we think if you follow that process, you can have much better results, and your advisors will be in compliance and acting in the best interest of their clients. All right, at this point, we're going to open up for questions. The first one I see here, Jason, is, let's see if I can read it. We have advisors with differing levels of experience and qualifications. Can we have multiple groups of advisors with differing controls such that one group of advisors has access to a different universe of product as well as different data points and different search criteria?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It ties back to the portfolio and view construction where you have a group of investments that are in one portfolio, if you will. Those portfolios are actually tied to what we call a group permission in Apereo, and group permissions are part of the permission matrix, where I, as a user, I have a role, one or more roles that dictate what functions I can perform, but it also has one or more groups assigned to my user ID, and that influences what I, as an individual, can actually see in the way of CUSIPs or securities and data. And then that group is reusable across one or more user IDs. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. Let's see here. Here's a question asking, we have over 5,000 financial advisors. Can this too be distributed to all 5,000 advisors?
Yes, that's one of the benefits of it being a web-enabled app. So we can configure as many users are required, and it's basically available to each advisor on their desktop.
Okay, great. All right, here's one. I think we answered this, but I'll repeat this. Can your application perform rule-based checks on the data points to where you create a portfolio of approved products so that the values change? Those securities can be reviewed to make sure they still qualify for inclusion.
Yeah, that was something that you alluded to early in your demonstration, and that is the fact that one of the criteria might be for building the portfolio, it might be based on maybe an expense ratio that it cannot exceed a certain amount. So it's important that the clients have the ability within the tool to say, I need to know if there are CUSIPs that the expense ratio changes, or maybe it's a performance-based attribute. If the performance drops below a certain level, or the manager tenure is potentially a concern, having the ability for the application to present those through a configurable rule-based utility is very helpful and very powerful, because then you can determine, do I have any investments that are outside of this universe that I need to control and potentially remove them from that universe or portfolio.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you. Let's see. Here's the next question. You had mentioned that proprietary securities like SMAs, ETFs, equities can be loaded alongside 40 Act funds. How do we upload securities and the data into your application?
That's a great question too, especially for clients that have thousands and thousands. We built again, going back to what you commented on earlier, where we wanted to eliminate the need for IT involvement. So we have a very intuitive configuration tool within Apereo where the clients can say, I want to build this import that contains this information. So they kind of dictate, what's contained in that file in the different formats. The primary one we see is Excel, which is available, but then you also get your delimited formats like pipe or tab or comma separated, so they can compose what they're sending in, what format, what's the sequence of the data, meaning I'm going to send in first the security issue ID, the name of the security. They configure all that in the tool, and then since we're hosting Apereo, software as a service, we establish a secure FTP protocol between our hosted Apereo site and their enterprise, such that if we're going out to pick up the file that they're configuring, we go through a secure tunnel. Mm-hmm. So they would just put this file, whether it's Excel or CSV, on a secure site on their side, and they configure within the tool. I want you to look for any new files every hour, every 2 hours, every day, once a day, whatever. They can configure that, and we poll their server to see if that file is available for pickup. And when we pick it up, we consume it, and that's how they get CUSIPs and data that's proprietary inside of Apereo.
Okay, great. All right, here's one we got in. Let's see if I can read my scribe's writing here. Since all individuals are different, how do you input the best interest of the individual to screen the portfolio against the individual's needs, not the firm's? All right, so this goes back to portfolio creation. So typically, this is sort of falling back. You can kind of go back to the old suitability rules of, conservative, moderately conservative, risk, high risk, whatever. So you could create varying portfolios that apply to not an individual, but to a certain type of individual. What is the risk tolerance, the age, the diversification of their portfolio. This particular category of individuals, we're going to build a portfolio that we think is best suited for them, right? So you can use the search criteria to go through and build that portfolio of securities that's going to meet the requirement of this group of individuals. So when the advisor goes to pick the product, then they would be, you could do this two ways actually. You could build it into the portfolio, or you could build it into the search engine. So you could build your search so that I don't want anything risky. You know, I want to fit this risk profile. I want stable product. I want this limit expense ratio, et cetera, et cetera. So you could either build a portfolio that meets this group of individuals, or you could build a search that meets the individual, or you could use a combination of the two. So I hope that kind of explains, but you have complete flexibility in defining the portfolio as well as the searches. So that was one of my suggestions, I think, earlier, was to build portfolios that make, broad category could meet the risk profile. But here again, you can expand that as wide as you want for a particular type of investor. Okay. Any more? No more questions? Oh, okay. Well, we may give you a couple of minutes of your afternoon back here. We're going to finish just a few minutes early. So just to wrap up, we will send out the recorded webinar to all attendees, and please feel free to distribute that. Whoever that could not make it, you can send these out. There's no proprietary limit, so let your other colleagues take a view. And if you have a question you didn't get to submit, but you think of it later, you can reply back to the email where we send out the recorded webinar, or you can go to our website for our contact information, or most of you probably have my email. Just email me, and we'll be glad to get back with you. So thank you for your time, and hopefully you'll join us for our next webinar. Thank you and good evening.